First thing she heard, before she heard anything else, was the sound of her own heart. Not beating, processing, there was a difference. She understood the difference now, though she had not chosen to understand it. Understanding had been installed the way a lock is installed in a door. Not for the person inside, but for whoever carries the key. Her name was Naya Makura. She had been 23 years old when she went into the operating theater. She did not know what age she was now. She knew only that the number meant less than it used to. The room around her was white, not the white of hospitals or laboratories, the white of systems. The white of an environment that had been scrubbed of everything unnecessary. There were no windows. There was no dust. There was a faint vibration through the floor that she recognized after a moment as the drive signature of a deep space transit vessel running at cruise speed. She was not on Earth. She lay, still, and listened to the processing sound where her heartbeat used to live, and she thought about the last clear memory she owned. A street in a city she loved, late autumn, leaves on the pavement, the color of old photographs. She had been walking toward a coffee shop. There had been a woman behind her. She remembered the sound of heels on wet stone, confident, unhurried, the walks of someone who has already won the thing she came to win. Then a sensation like all the lights going out at once. Then white. She did not move. Not because she couldn't. She understood, with the new clarity that had been installed alongside the new heartbeat, that she could move quite well. Better than before, in most respects. But she lay still because she was listening, and what she was listening for was the location of every other living thing in the room. There were two. Both of them were alien. She knew this the same way she now knew her own pulse was a clock rather than a drum. Two presences registered differently from human ones. Their respiration patterns slightly off rhythm. Their body heat distributed in a configuration that no mammalian biology would produce. One of them was close, perhaps 3 meters, standing near what she estimated was the door. The other was farther away, behind a partition, moving with slow deliberateness through what sounded like equipment checks. Naya opened her eyes. The ceiling was white. The light came from everywhere and nowhere. The ambient glow of a space designed by something that did not care about human preferences for direction, warmth. She turned her head slowly and saw the closer alien, bipedal, roughly humanoid but wrong in the proportions. Its limbs a fraction too long, its joints bending at angles that were almost right. It wore a uniform the color of deep water. It was watching her. Subject is conscious, it said, to no one she could see. Its voice had harmonics in it that she felt in her back teeth. Condition nominal, she repeated softly to herself. The alien tilted its head. You understand us. You installed the translation. She sat up. The movement felt precise, calibrated. Nothing in her body resisted or ached or stiffened the way it should have after lying still for however long she had been lying still. You installed a number of things. Would you like me to list them? The alien was quiet for a moment. Then, that won't be necessary. It wasn't a genuine offer, she said. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed and sat up straight and looked at the room with the new eyes they had given her. The enhanced vision mapped the space in layers. Thermal, structural, electromagnetic. She could see the door mechanism in the wall. She could see the power conduits running behind the panels. She could see the second alien behind the partition, its body heat a soft bloom of orange-yellow through the white. She could also see something she had not expected. A third heat signature, smaller, indistinct, tucked into a corner behind a rack of equipment, something that was almost human. She did not look at it directly. Where is my escort, she asked. Escort, the woman who brought me here, the one who has been running this project. She kept her voice level. They had enhanced her cardiovascular regulation along with everything else. She could not flush with anger or pale with fear unless she chose to. She chose not to. I want to speak with her. See? The alien by the door exchanged a look with the one behind the partition. She could track the exchange with her new thermal resolution, the slight tilt of both bodies toward each other. And then it touched something on its uniform collar. The architect is not scheduled. Tell her I'm awake, Naya said. Tell her I know what she did. Tell her I want to know why. There was a pause. The door opened. The woman who walked through it was human in the way a scalpel is human. Made from the same materials as a person, shaped by human hands but purposed for cutting. Her name was Suvra Corano, and she had the kind of face that photographs well at any angle because it was designed to project rather than to feel. She was dressed in the same deep water color as the alien guards, which Naya noted and filed away. "You're faster than the projection model suggested," Suvra said. She sounded pleased by this, the way an engineer is pleased when a prototype exceeds its specs. "You've been following me for a long time," Naya said. "Since you were 19. Walked to the center of the room and stood with her hands loosely at her sides. A deliberate posture, one that said, "I am not threatening you," though they both understood this was not because she wasn't dangerous. "Your family carries an unusual genetic marker. We've been looking for it for 11 years. We, the organization I represent." She paused. You've heard the name." Naya had heard the name. Everyone on Earth had heard the name. It appeared in the static at the edge of news cycles, in the gaps between official statements, in the places where government said nothing, because saying nothing was safer than admitting what was true. 100 was the name given to the entity that had been, for the past 3 decades, carefully and methodically preparing Earth for something no one in any official building would confirm. "You work for them," Naya said. "You are one of them." "I lead the Human Integration Division," Suvra said, which is a polite way of saying I'm the one who decides which humans are candidates. "Candidates for what you did to me."
Candidates for completion.
Suvra's voice had not changed, but something in her stillness intensified. "Naya, you were always going to be exactly what you are now. We only accelerated the process, removed the uncertainty. What I am now," Naya said, "is a weapon. Yes, built to fight for them." She did not gesture toward the alien guards. She did not need to. "Built to fight alongside them," Suvra said. "Which is different. Which is the only version of this conversation that ends with your species still existing in a century." Naya looked at her for a long moment. The new eyes mapped the microtensions in Suvra's face, the jaw, the orbital muscles, the small betrayals of the body that the mind can't fully suppress, even in the most disciplined person. She was telling what she believed was the truth. That was the most frightening kind of person, the one who has arrived at their convictions through a genuine process and cannot be shaken from them because they were earned. "You built me to be first," Naya said. "First," Suvra confirmed. "In German, eins, you named me. The project has a name. You are the project." The heat signature in the corner, behind the equipment rack, had not moved. Naya kept her gaze on Suvra. "I want to see the rest of the ship," she said. "That's not. I want to see the rest of the ship," she said again. "And I want an answer to a question. You said this is the only version of the conversation that ends with humanity surviving. I want to know what the other version looks like. The one where I refuse." Suvra was quiet for 3 seconds. Naya counted them. "Walk with me," Suvra said. The ship was vast in the way that government buildings are vast. Not because the space is needed, but because the scale communicates something. Power, duration. The weight of a plan that has been running longer than any individual life. They walked through corridors that curved slightly upward, following the arc of a hull designed for transit through regions of space where geometry is not reliable. And everywhere Naya went, she cataloged personnel, weaponry, access points, power signatures. There were few humans on the ship. The ones she saw did not look like prisoners. They looked like colleagues, which was worse. "There is a fleet," Suvra said, as they stood at a viewport that looked out on nothing but stars. "Not hundreds fleet. Not a fleet in any sense that implies military. Call it a tide. It has been moving toward this system for 60 years. It will arrive in 11. When it arrives, it will make a determination, based on what it finds here, about whether this system is inhabited, in the only sense that matters to the entities comprising it." "Inhabited," Naya said, "by something worth preserving." Suvra's reflection in the viewport was calm and precise. "There is a threshold. The species on the other side of that threshold, they live. Species below it, they are archived, preserved in the sense that a museum preserves a thing, not alive, not continuing. And you believe that giving them warriors. I believe that giving them a warrior they recognize, a form they understand as capable, as worthy." Suvra turned from the viewport. "You understand the logic." Naya understood the logic. The logic was in all the ways that terrible things are often sound in their logic. internally consistent, built on premises that could not be argued with without arguing with reality itself. The fleet would come. The determination would be made. Humanity, as it currently existed, would not meet the threshold. Unless, you're betting everything, Naya said, on one person. On one first person, Suvra said. After you, others. But you are the proof, the demonstration. The one who shows them what we are capable of becoming. Voice softened just slightly. The first crack in the professional surface, and it was genuine. You're not a weapon, Naya. You're an argument. Naya said nothing. She was thinking about the heat signature in the equipment room, which had moved while they were walking. It was following them through the ship, staying at a consistent distance of about 20 meters, always on the other side of a wall, always just outside any sightline. It was too deliberate for coincidence, too careful for a member of the crew. Sans was on this ship, who was not supposed to be here. She filed this away. She spent 3 days learning the ship, not the 3 days as a cooperative guest. She asks. She participated in the briefing Suvra arranged. She ate the food that was provided and slept in the quarters assigned to her. But she also spent those 3 days mapping. Every conversation gave her more. The power cycle schedules, the patrol rhythms of the alien crew, the location of every docking bay, an emergency access shaft and maintenance crawlway. She built the map in the new architecture of her mind, which was faster than the old one, and retained everything. On the third night, she found the heat signature. It had been living in a maintenance shaft 1 level below the crew quarters, surviving on whatever it could scavenge from supply caches that the 100 crew clearly had not noticed were being periodically raided. When Naya pulled open the access panel and pointed her light into the shaft, she found a woman, young, small-framed, dark-haired, pressed against the far wall with her knees drawn to her chest and her eyes wide and luminous. She was not entirely human. Naya could see this clearly, with the enhanced vision. The energy signature at her core was wrong. Bioluminescent in a frequency no human body generated, the edges of her outline faintly iridescent in the thermal spectrum. But her face was human. Fear was human. The way she had drawn herself into the smallest possible shape was human. The oldest animal response, the one that predates language. I'm not going to report you, Naya said quietly. The woman, girl, almost. She could not have been older than 18, maybe 19, did not move. I've known you were there since the first day, Naya said. I've been waiting to find a moment when we wouldn't be observed. She sat cross-legged in front of the access panel, bringing herself down to a less threatening height. My name is Naya. Tell me yours. A long pause then, barely audible. Neshi. How did you get on this ship, Neshi? Another pause. Then Neshi unfolded slightly, just enough to speak properly. I followed someone I was trying to find. She had an accent that Naya couldn't place. Something that mapped partially onto several languages and fully onto none of them. The person I was following came aboard in the last port. I thought they were still here, but they weren't. What kind of someone? Neshi looked at her for a long moment with those wide, luminous eyes, the kind that knows things. About the fleet, about what's coming. Paused. You know, about the fleet. I was told about the fleet, Naya said. By the woman who runs this ship. Suvra Carano. Neshi said the name like she'd been carrying it around for a while. She's not wrong about the fleet. She is wrong about the solution. Chin lifted slightly. Not defiant. Exactly, but definite. You can't meet them by becoming what they already are. They've seen that. Thousands of species have tried. Every species that has ever encountered the fleet has eventually tried to optimize itself into acceptability. She paused. None of them made the threshold. Naya looked at her. What made the threshold? That's what I was trying to find out, Neshi said. That's what the persons I was following knows. She hesitated. I'm not from Earth. I'm from a world the fleet passed 40 years ago. People were archived. I was an exception. A child, too young to have fully developed the markers they use to classify. I've spent my life trying to understand what the markers actually measure. Her voice was even, but the evening of it was a kind of bravery. She was talking about the death of her entire civilization. I don't think it's strength. I don't think it's capability. Think it's something else. Something that your species has in abundance, maybe more than anything the fleet has ever encountered. I think Suvra Corano is going to eliminate it in the name of making you worthy of survival. What does my species have? Naya said carefully. That others don't. Neshi was quiet for a moment then. You grieve your dead, even when it costs you time you don't have, even when it slows you down, even when every rational calculation says the resources spent on grief could be spent on survival. You stop. You remember. You name the ones you've lost. She looked at Naya steadily. I have never encountered another species that does this in the way you do. Fleet. The entities that comprise it. They have no word for it. In the 12 years I've been studying their recorded assessments, I've never found a species that ranked in the acceptable range that didn't do something like it. Naya sat with that for a moment. Happened to the ones that did rank acceptably, she asked. They continued, Neshi said. Differently than before, usually, changed by the encounter. But continuing. The ship hummed around them. Somewhere 2 levels up, the crew was completing a shift rotation. Naya could feel the vibration patterns change as stations were handed off. I need to get off this ship, Naya said. And I think you do too. The next port is in 4 days, Neshi said. But there's a supply drone scheduled for ejection in. She glanced at something on her wrist. A small device that Naya had not initially noticed. 6 hours. Smaller than the registered cargo, but the bay it launches from isn't monitored during 3rd shift. Naya looked at her. You've been planning this. For 2 days, Neshi said, with a small, careful smile. I was waiting to see if you were the kind of person I thought you were. What kind is that? The kind that, when given a complete map of an enemy facility and a clear path to the exit, stops to pull open a maintenance hatch to check on the person hiding sim inside. Naya considered this. That's an inefficient quality. Yes, Neshi agreed. I know. The drone bay was on the underside of the ship, accessible through 3 levels of maintenance shafts and a stretch of corridor that passed within 10 meters of the watch station. On deck 4, Naya had memorized the patrol schedule. She had run the angles. There was a 6-minute window, starting 40 seconds after the 3rd shift handoff, when the corridor would be clear. They moved through the ship like water, finding the path of least resistance. Not fast, not slow. Not the movement of people fleeing, but of people belonging to wherever they were, which is the most effective form of invisibility available. Naya had learned this from a book she had read at 17, a book about soldiers in occupied cities. And she thought about it now, and as she and Neshi moved through the humming white corridors. You do not hide from the enemy. You become irrelevant to them. They were 8 meters from the drone bay access when the alarm went off. Not a full alarm, not the kind that floods the corridors with light and sound and turns every crew member into a search party. A localized alert, the kind that says someone has noticed an anomaly, which is the most dangerous kind because it means someone is thinking rather than reacting. Naya heard it in the power fluctuation more than in any audible signal. She felt the change in the ship's electromagnetic field as surveillance systems went active. She looked at Neshi. Neshi looked back at her. They ran. The drone bay was a box of gray metal and mechanical smelling of lubricant and ozone, and the particular cold of space held back by a single layer of shielding. The drone itself was a 6-meter cylinder strapped to a launching frame, its cargo manifest reading biological sample package Tier 3. A classification Naya was reasonably certain was false, was why Neshi had identified it as their exit. They were sealing themselves into the cargo section when the bay door opened behind them. Figures came through. Not alien crew, but humans, which meant 100. Which meant people who had chosen this. 2 of them Naya did not recognize. The 3rd she did. A woman in 100 uniform, young, with a Kamen Rider Fatale designation patch on her shoulder. The Mirror Warrior. The one built to counter whatever Naya was meant to be. The inverse. Name Naya had learned from the briefings was Sumika. Sumika looked at her across the drone bay with an expression that was not unkind. You understand why I can't let you go, she said. I understand why you believe you can't, Naya said. The project requires. The project, Naya said, is wrong. Sumika's eyes moved to Neshi and held there. You've been talking to the alien. Her name is Neshi. She's not from a species you'd recognize. Her people were archived 40 years ago. Naya kept her voice level. She let what she was feeling come through. Not anger, not fear, but something older and more durable than either. She survived. She has been trying to understand what it takes to survive for her entire life. Not because she wants power, because she wants to know what her people could have been. She looked at Sumika steadily. That's not an argument for your project. That's an argument against it. Sumika was quiet for a moment. The 200 operatives behind her had spread slightly, positioning for containment. Fleet arrives in 11 years, Sumika said. I know, we don't have time. We have 11 years, Naya said. That's not nothing. That's enough time to be something other than what Suvra Carano decided we should be. She reached into the cargo section and pulled out the access panel. I'm leaving. Neshi is leaving with me. I'm not asking for permission. I'm not threatening you. I'm going home. Sumika stepped forward. I was built the same way you were. I know that too. The surgery, the enhancement, Sumika stopped. Something in her face moved, a tectonic shift beneath the professional surface. It hurts. It still hurts. Every day. Naya looked at her. Yes, she said, it does. Then why are you running toward them? The people who didn't do anything to prepare. Just lived their lives while. Because they're mine, Naya said simply. They're the people I'm from. And unprepared and exactly as they are. She felt it as she said it. The thing that Neshi had named, the thing that the fleet's recorded assessments had apparently noted in species after species, the thing that Suvra Carano had tried to measure and replicate and install in a body along with carbon fiber musculature and neural processing. Great. It couldn't be installed, it could only be carried. My mother's name was Haruki, she said. She died when I was 12. I still miss her in the morning when the light comes through windows the way it came through hers. I will never not miss her. Project Suvra is building doesn't have room for that. But whatever is coming toward us in 11 years is going to have to reckon with it. The 100 operatives moved. Naya moved first. What followed was not a fight in the way that fights are usually narrated. Blow by blow, tactic by tactic. It was closer to a conversation, one conducted in the language of bodies, and it ended the way conversations end when one participant has been living in a state of continuous grief for 11 years, and the other participants have only recently been told what grief is. She was not faster than them. She was not stronger than them. She was more specific. She knew exactly which joints were designed to be vulnerable, because they were the same joints she had, and the people who had redesigned her had not thought to tell her this would also mean she understood how to reach them. When it was over, the operatives were on the floor, breathing but not moving, and Sumika was standing exactly where she had been. Naya looked at her. You didn't help them, she said. Sumika was quiet for a moment. Then the architect said you would try to run. She said if you did, it meant the bonding hadn't taken Cian, that you weren't viable. She looked down at the two operatives. She built me to catch you if that happened. Pause. She didn't ask me what I thought about it. What do you think about it? Naya said. Sumika did not answer immediately. She stood in the gray mechanical light of the drone bay, and something happened in her face. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the small internal earthquake of a person reconsidering the ground they're standing on. My name, she said finally, was Sumika, for the project. I know, Naya said, it's still your name. Another pause. Then Sumika stepped aside. They sealed themselves into the drone cargo section. All three of them, because Sumika followed, and Neshi initiated the launch sequence from the small device on her wrist, and the drone shot out into the dark. Space, inside a cargo drone, does not feel like space. It feels like a very small room that is also somehow moving faster than anything, has a right to move. There were no windows. There was the vibration of the drive which Naya recognized as the same frequency as the processing sound she heard when she listened to herself think, and she found this almost funny. They rode in silence for a while. Where are we going? Sumika asked. Earth, eventually, Naya said. We need to make a transit stop. There's a station Neshi knows. And then we figure out what 11 years of being human looks like. Sumika considered this. In the close dark of the cargo section, the drive vibrating through the metal, she looked younger than her mission profile suggested she should. She looked like someone who had spent a long time being exactly what she was told to be, and was only now feeling the shape of the box she'd been living in. That's not a plan, she said. No, Naya agreed, it's a beginning. The transit station was a place that existed in the gaps between recognized space. The kind of station that shows up on no official charts, maintained by species, who had learned that the best way to survive the fleet's advance wave was to become very good at being somewhere else. She knew the docking codes. The station knew Neshi. They spent 4 days there, not resting, working. Neshi had contacts. Survivors of archived species. Entities who had watched the determination process from the other side and lived, in the manner of living available to them, to describe what they had seen. They sat in a low-ceilinged room that smelled of metal and something sweetly chemical, and they listened. The entities were various, some bipedal, some not. Some communicating in modes that Neshi translated with her wrist device, and some in the modified trade language that moved through the station like water. But they all said variations of the same thing. The fleet did not want warriors. The fleet had warriors. The fleet had seen warriors from 10,000 species, and warriors were, from the perspective of something that had been moving through galaxies for longer than most civilizations, had been drawing pictures on cave walls, entirely unremarkable. What the fleet had not seen, in sufficient abundance to be compelling, was a species that kept faith with the version of itself that had been broken, that kept showing up, post-fracture, carrying the pieces. Your word for it, one of the entities told Naya, a creature like a dense knot of magnetic fields, perceived more as a pressure in the room than as a physical shape, is unclear to me. The concept maps to something in our records that we associate with the way water moves through rock, not by force, by duration. Neshi translated additional notes after the session. They call it the persistent principle, she said. The capacity to continue after the thing that was supposed to stop you. And humans have this, Sumika said. She was not doubting, she was checking. Humans have this, Neshi said, in a concentration that I have not found documented in any other species. It may be related to your particular version of mortality. The fact that you know you will die, individually, and continue anyway. Most species either don't have individual death as a coherent concept, or they have it and it paralyzes them. She paused. You have it and you make art about it. Naya thought about her mother again. About the light through windows in the morning. About the way she still sometimes set 2 pre-cups by reflex instead of 1. We have to go home, she said. Getting home was not simple. Simple was not a condition available to them. They had left 100 vessel without authorization, disabled 200 operatives, and taken 100 adjacent asset with them. Suvra Carano would know where they were going. She would have resources. But Naya had 4 days on a transit station full of people who were very good at not being found, and she had a mind that was now faster and more precise than any standard issue intelligence. And she had Neshi, who had been surviving on nothing but determination and archive data for 12 years. And she had Sumika, who knew every 100 protocol because she had been built to enforce them. They came home through a freight lane that registered their drone as a commercial biomedical shipment. They came down through atmosphere, over the Southern Ocean, and surfaced on a coast that no one was watching because it was 4 in the morning local time and nothing ever happened there. Naya stood on a beach in the dark. The sand was cold under her feet. The ocean was black and loud and smelled like itself, like salt and depth, and the long history of the planet that had nothing to do with anything, except being a planet. The stars overhead were the same stars that she had looked at from her childhood bedroom window, which was 1,400 kilometers north. And she stood there for a moment and felt the weight of all of them. She heard Sumika come to stand beside her, and then Neshi, on her other side, who had never stood on this planet before, and who was looking up at the sky with an expression that Naya did not have a word for. Not wonder, exactly, and not grief, and not the particular resonance between them, but something that lived in the space those things made together. It's big, Neshi said. Yes, Naya said, your sky is very big, I know. They stood there for a while. The ocean did what oceans do, which is continue, is the oldest form of the persistent principle. Suvra will come, Sumika said. Yes, Naya said. And the fleet is still coming. Yes, so what do we do? Naya thought about the answer. She thought about it the way she had thought about everything since the new architecture had been installed, with more speed and clarity than before, but also with the knowledge that speed and clarity were not the same thing as wisdom, and that the things the enhancement could not install were possibly the more important ones. "We tell people," she said. "We tell them what's coming, and what it's actually measuring for, and we let them be who they are. All of it, the grief and the stubbornness, and the way they keep making art, even in the middle of emergencies, and the fact that they stop to grieve their dead, even when every tactical calculation says they should keep moving." She looked at the horizon, where the sky was beginning to differentiate itself from the water. "We don't optimize them. We witness them." "Suvra thinks that's not enough," Sumika said. "Suvra might be right," Naya said. "Suvra's version of enough doesn't leave anything worth saving." The sun came up over the Southern Ocean. They had 10 years, 10 months, some days. They used them. Not quietly, there is nothing quiet about telling a planet that something is coming. Special. When organizations, governments would prefer 100 have spent decades cultivating the sense that let their plans proceed without interference. There were confrontations. There were moments when Suvra's reach found them, and they had to move, had to fight, had to be exactly the thing Naya had said they weren't, just to survive long enough to continue saying it. There were losses. There was a city in the northern hemisphere where people Naya had begun to trust were taken, and she could not reach them in time, and she had to carry that. She carried it the way water carries sediment. It became part of her, changed her, settled into the new architecture, and made it something Suvra's engineers had not planned for. Sumika became something she had not been designed to be, which is to say she became herself, the warrior who had been built as a mirror, a dark reflection, a countermeasure, found that the thing she had been reflecting was not what she'd been told it was. She stopped functioning as an inverse. She became, through some process that neither of them fully understood or felt the need to fully understand, a protector of exactly the kind that neither Suvra's project nor its inverse had imagined. One who knew the cost because she had paid it in the currency of her own humanity. Neshi continued her research. She found others like herself, archives, survivors of the fleet's previous passages, people-shaped remnants of civilizations that had learned the hard way what the threshold actually measured. She built a network of them, careful and persistent, the way water moves through rock. They collated everything they knew. They made it available, not to governments, not to military structures, not to to people, to the ones who would stop in the middle of an evacuation to carry a stranger's child because the stranger was injured, to the ones who, in the ruins of something, immediately started arguing about how to rebuild it, to the ones who mourned loudly and without apology and got up the next day and kept going. There was a moment, 2 years before the fleet arrived, when Suvra found them. The confrontation was not in a drone bay this time. It was in a city, a real one, the kind with 10 million people going about their days in it, cooking dinner and arguing with their families and doing homework and watching the sky, specific unease that had been building for a decade. As more and more people became aware that they were being watched by something they see, Suvra came with everything she had. 100 assets, 100 built warriors, the full architecture of a project that had been running for 30 years, and believed it was the only thing standing between humanity and archival. Naya came with what she had, which was different. What she had were people. Not enhanced, or not only enhanced, not uniformed, not organized in the military sense. People who had been told the truth and had decided, in the manner of the specific human stubbornness that Neshi had spent years trying to understand, that they were going to be present for what was coming. People who had stopped and grieved and gotten back up. A woman who had driven 12 hours through a storm because someone had called and said they needed help, and she had not thought to calculate whether it was worth it. A man who had sat with his friend through the last night of his friend's illness, talking about nothing important, just talking. Because talking was the thing that was needed. A girl who was 17 years old and had decided that the most important thing she could do was learn the 18 most spoken languages on the planet, so that when the time came, no one would be left out of the conversation. None of them were Naya. None of them were enhanced. They were just themselves, in the density and concentration that Neshi's research had suggested might be precisely what the fleet had never seen, or in quantities large enough to matter. The confrontation was long and it was costly. Naya took damage, real damage, structural, the kind the repair protocols would need weeks to address. Sumika was injured. Suvra's people were formidable, because Suvra was serious, and her project was the product of genuine terror and 30 years of work. But, at the center of the confrontation, when everything else had been stripped away, it came down to a moment that Naya had not planned and could not have planned. Suvra stood facing her in a corridor that had been cleared by the chaos around it, and Suvra's voice was the only thing Naya could clearly hear above the sound of everything that was happening. "You're going to get them all killed," Suvra said. "You understand that. If you're wrong, if the fleet doesn't recognize what you think it recognizes, then everything ends. Every human life, everything they've ever made, everything they've ever said to each other in the dark." "I know," Naya said. "And you're still doing this. Yes. Why?" Suvra's voice for the first time was not precise and engineered. It was human in the way that someone is human when they have run out of the thing they were using to not be. "Why are you willing to gamble all of it on something as intangible as grief? As the way people stop to comfort each other? How do you know it matters? How do you know?" "I don't," Naya said. "I know it's true. I don't know that it matters to them, but I know it's what we are. And I'd rather show them what we are and fail than show them what you think we should be and succeed." She looked at Suvra steadily, with the new eyes that could see every micro-tension in a face, and with something older that had nothing to do with enhancement. "Because your version of success leaves us with nothing to survive for." Suvra was quiet for a long time then, in a voice that was smaller than anything Naya had heard from her. "I just didn't want them to die." "I know," Naya said. "Neither did I." The fleet arrived on a Tuesday, not in the way invasions arrive in stories, not with fire, not with a wall of ships blotting out the sky. It arrived the way weather arrives. Present, then more present, then undeniable. A change in the electromagnetic character of the solar system, pressure that instruments detected before eyes did, a new quality to the light, and then contact. Not communication, contact, in a form that was more like being studied than being spoken to, the sense of attention from something that had been observing for a long time, and was now choosing to observe more closely. It lasted 3 days. Naya spent those 3 days on the surface, in the city, the people who had gathered because gathering was the thing to do. Not a military formation. Not an organized display of capability. People, in all their undifferentiated reality, doing what people did when they were frightened and uncertain, and together, they talked. They made food. They argued about things that mattered and things that didn't. They checked on each other. They held the hands of people they didn't know. They wept, some of them, and were not ashamed of it. They told stories about people they had lost, in the manner that humans tell such stories. As if the dead are still owed something by the living, as if the telling is a form of continued presence. On the 3rd day, the attention shifted. Neshi was sitting beside Naya when it happened. She gripped Naya's arm, and her grip was shaking. The only sign of emotion she typically allowed herself. The small earthquake running through the contact. "They're assessing," she said. "I know. I've never, in 12 years, I've never been present when this happened. I've only seen the records." Her voice was barely audible. "I don't know what it's going to say." "Neither do I," Naya said. They waited. Around them, people waited too, in all the ways that people wait. Some in silence, some talking to fill it, some holding other people, some holding themselves, some looking at the sky, and some looking at the ground, and some looking at the faces of the people they loved with the specific focus of people who are afraid of what they might see instead. The assessment lasted 11 minutes. There was no announcement, no light from the sky, no transmission. The pressure simply shifted, changed in character. Quality of the attention became something else, not evaluation but acknowledgement. Neshi made a sound that Naya had never heard her make, a small, unsteady exhale like the first breath after surfacing from very deep water. "We're above the threshold," she said. Her voice was remarkable in its evenness, given that her hands were shaking badly now. I haven't processed all of it yet. But the pattern, it's the same pattern that appears in the records of the species that continued. The acknowledgement signature." She looked at Naya. It's the same. Naya sat with this for a moment. She thought about Suvra, who was somewhere behind a legal process that would take years to resolve, and who had meant well, in the way that people mean well when they have decided that meaning well excuses the shape of their solutions. She thought about Sumika, who was 3 rows back in the crowd somewhere, and who had asked her that morning, with the careful flatness of someone asking a question they are not certain they're allowed to ask, whether she thought there would be time, after all of this, to go back to the city where she had grown up and find out which of the people she remembered were still there. Thought about her mother's name, which was Haruki, and the light through windows in the morning. Yes, she said. Around her, people were beginning to realize. The realization moved through the crowd the way sound moves, in waves, in the direction of whoever was closest to someone who understood what Neshi's words meant. And then it was there, the thing that happens when people realize they are going to continue. Not the loud joy of victory, not the relief of a danger narrowly avoided, tut, something quieter and more durable, the acknowledgement that the morning that had felt impossibly remote was now going to happen, and the one after it, and the one after that. Naya stood up. She stood up in the middle of all of it. Not to be seen, not to make a statement, because the body does that when something long held is set down, stands to find its new center of gravity. Sumika appeared beside her, and Neshi on the other side, and the 3 of them stood together in the noise of a city that was beginning to understand that it had a future. What now? Sumika asked. Whatever's next, Naya said. She was still Kamen Rider Ainz. The name had attached itself in the 2 years since Neshi had found a reference to it in Suvra's project files. The designation for the thing Naya was that Suvra had not quite managed to create. Not the optimized warrior, but the demonstrated argument, the proof of concept, the first. In German, Eins, in every other language, 1. She was also Naya Makura, who missed her mother in the mornings, who had stood on a cold beach at 4 in the morning, listening to the ocean, large and persistent, and entirely uninterested in the affairs of the species that lived on its shores, who had pulled open a maintenance hatch, because there was something living inside that needed to not be alone. The sun was coming up over the city. She watched it. Around her, 11 million people were doing the same. Eins begins.